In 2023, Hearthstone released a brand new game mode called Twist. I think it's the greatest game mode that they have released in a very long time. Here's the problem. Hearthstone is virtually killing it. If you don't know what Twist is, that doesn't shock me at all. I think Hearthstone does a really bad job of advertising this really interesting game mode. It's basically like a tavern brawl that is a month long that they could do whatever they want. If it wants to be a curated card pool like certain expansions, or it wants to be a very interesting rule set like commons only. And when they announced this back in 2023, I got really excited. Not because I think the idea is really cool, but as someone who's always wanted custom games into Hearthstone, this felt like it could potentially be that without giving me the custom rule set. There are so many different ways that I can play Hearthstone that I have showed on this YouTube channel that I truly believe that Twist could be something so amazing. And they have definitely showed glimpses of what Twist can be, but also they have showed the potential issue with it if Blizzard doesn't give care to this at all. Now, before I even get into the issues of Twist and what Blizzard is doing to it behind the barn, let's go through what this article says, because I think you can understand why I would be so excited for a format like this. Claim they already had fun and nostalgic Twist formats planned for the rest of the year, but we also want to hear from you what Twist formats you would like to see, or if you end up loving one so much you want to see us bring it back. This is going to be very important later. Twitch formats are planned to change regularly, but not necessarily with every season. Twist also might be deactivated from time to time as we prepare for the next upcoming season. So in other words, Twist is going to be available pretty often, not every single month, but there will be a new fresh way to play Hearthstone unless the players really like a specific twist and it'll come back again. They already had a version of this a really long time ago with the classic format. When Forged and the Barons came out, we got a classic format, which was basically a specific patch way back in the day to play the old version of Hearthstone. And this, for a month, was actually extremely enjoyable. But of course, just like everything that doesn't get an update, eventually it did get boring, which is why I think Twist sounded so cool. The unfortunate reality for Twist, though, is it started off extremely poorly because of the first Twist format they picked. The Twist format they decided to start with was called New Age, and this was a beta format. So I'm guessing they're getting analytics on how much people really like Twist and maybe getting some ideas of what they should do or shouldn't do in the future. The real issue with this format is that it basically felt like standard Hearthstone for the last 2 years, so there wasn't something super engaging about it. I guess they did make it so there are no neutrals allowed, even though that idea is really cool in theory. Based on the sets that they actually had into this, it just wasn't an extremely popular format. But I should mention the one benefit of a format like this is most people are going to have these cards, and therefore most people would be willing to try out this format if they had the cards available. One of the biggest problems with Twist is how they monetize it, but again, we'll get to that later on in this video. The unfortunate reality for Twist is that the very first impression was absolutely horrendous for most people, and therefore Twist didn't get off to a very great start. Immediately after the New Age format, Twist decided to take a break for a month. This was probably because the new expansion was coming out, which is kind of understandable because you would rather have people focus on the new stuff rather than some older weird format that you're introducing. This unfortunately did have some consequences because by shining the light on something else and not giving any time to Twist, unfortunately people just kind of forgot about it. So that means the next Twist format has to be something extremely interesting, which I think it could have been, but unfortunately something happened. The actual first non-beta season of Twist was called Wonders. The concept of this sounded so interesting in theory, and I know what you're thinking. Is that Dr. Boom, Lotheb, Elise? Why are they using the new art of N'Zoth when the OG one is infinitely better? This format of Twist was basically a celebration of the early years of Hearthstone. This included everything from Legacy, which is virtually classic, all the way up into Mean Streets of Gadgetzin. This sounded like a really cool idea because we never really got to experience how good Patches the Pirate would have been with Lotheb, for instance. Now, the real selling point of this Twist format was the concept of nostalgia and feeling what the older Hearthstone games would be like. Back in the day of smacking your Yeti into another Yeti is a timeless classic that I truly couldn't wait to try again. The issue is that the nostalgia was kind of ruined with the introduction of a brand new expansion called the Caverns of Time. Before I even get into what the Caverns of Time did to the Twist format, we first have to understand what what the Caverns of Time was. This was marketed as a wild set for Hearthstone. Wild, for those of you who don't know, is the eternal format that contains every single card. This is actually, in my opinion, not a bad thing, because Magic the Gathering does this all the time with their sets like Modern Horizons, which doesn't focus only on the main game mode standard, it focuses on a format that people still play and enjoy. The problem is that the advertising was kind of misleading. It wasn't really a set for Wild, it was a set for Twist. The whole concept behind Caverns of Time, in my opinion at least, is kind of exciting. It is the concept of introducing cards into a format containing older expansions where their power level matches the cards of these older expansions. That way, there are new exciting deck building strategies, while at the same time, things are not just copy paste what they used to be back in the day. Unfortunately, the reality was Caverns of Time didn't really do that. In fact, you could argue that the introduction of Caverns of Time made Twist objectively worse for multiple reasons. The problem was that Caverns of Time did a bunch of buffs to cards that didn't really need it based on the power level that was available for this format, but also added cards with an insane power level that actually ruined the format because they did not nerf them in time. The card I am referring to mainly is the Chamber of Visitus. This is the nerf version. It used to have 2 mana and 3 durability, and it said look at 3 cards in your hand and choose one to discard and draw 2 cards. The main issue with this card was the draw. If you played older Hearthstone, you probably remember a lot of the card draw really sucked and only certain classes had decent card draw. If you give Warlock a consistent way of discarding the card that you want while also drawing, things are gonna get a little broken pretty quickly. As well as introducing brand new cards into this new Twist format, the Caverns of Time decided to buff a lot of the older cards so they weren't as weak as they were before. Again, a really cool idea in theory because some of these cards were unplayable. The issue is if they're too good now, the power discrepancy is a little whack. If you played during the older days of Mean Streets of Gadgetzan, Jade Rogue kind of sucked because a lot of the cards for the tribe, for Rogue specifically, were just kind of bad. They decided to buff virtually every single one, and on top of that, introduce a new card called Jade Telegram. This one is the nerf version, of course. This one actually used to be 3 mana, and just like the Chamber, this card was running rampant in the first month of this Twist format. Now, you would think that they would nerf some cards pretty quickly, considering that Twist formats only last a month. They literally waited until the last 3 days of the month to nerf these cards. By that point in time, this Twist format was pretty much dead. Now, the issues with both of these cards being so prevalent in Twist is that the meta got stale so quickly that people just kind of gave up, because no matter what deck you played, unfortunately, the reality was you were gonna lose to these decks 80% of the time. But that's not even considering maybe the worst part about this entire format. Now, other than these outliers, we have to remember that almost 99% of these cards are not playable in Wild. The other really inherent big issue with the Caverns of Time is that if they're not playable in Wild, that means Blizzard is expecting you to buy an expansion that is only gonna be around for a month. If I'm a free-to-play player, there is no way you're expecting me to try out Twist if the barrier of entry is cards that won't be relevant in a month. Potentially, of course, depending on what the next Twist format is, which caused a ginormous problem for Twist. If I'm someone who enjoyed older Hearthstone, but I am a free-to-play player, I'm not gonna waste my gold on older cards that are not gonna be relevant in a month. And if I am a newer Hearthstone player that's never played these older formats, again, why am I wasting gold on cards that are not gonna be relevant in a month? It just doesn't make any sense. The unfortunate reality is, and I'll be the one to say it, Blizzard obviously needed the Caverns of Time to be successful because that's how they were going to make money on the Twist format. The following format to Wonders was Wonders XL, which is virtually the exact same format, except for now you could go up to 40 cards. And with each card past 30, you get an additional life. It was a cool kind of way of playing with Prince Redithal. But the issue was, though, if people weren't already excited for the normal Wonders format, how could you expect anybody to want to play the new Wonders XL format? They then did Return to Ungoro, which is the same concept as Wonders, but you guessed it, they added Journey to Ungoro to the expansion list, which of course I love Journey to Ungoro. Most people do. It's a very fond memory when it comes to Hearthstone, but if this is just Wonders plus Ungoro, people are not going to be that interested. People are already looking for something new and exciting. The format after that was the exact exact same thing, except for it was the XL version. As much as it can be really interesting to add a new expansion into a format that already exists, if people weren't excited for the format to begin with, it's not gonna really change by adding Journey to Un'Goro back in. Now, I'm not gonna say no one enjoyed these formats. I played all of these for a little bit, but of course it gets a little boring when it's virtually the same thing every single month. But these formats definitely caused a huge problem for Twist in two different ways. The first one was a lot of players stopped playing Twist very early on and virtually stopped caring about the format and didn't care about any of the updates. And this leads me to the second problem, which was the people that actually really like the Twist format had a horrible time with it because of the queue times. With a low population of players during these Twist formats, the people who actually really liked playing these had a huge problem with queue times. And I'm talking like 10 minutes to get into a single match. I mentioned earlier in this video as well that the advertising for this format has been very lackluster. It is extremely rare that you get any indication that there is an update to Twist, and unless you're actually paying attention to the fact that there is a new Twist format available, you're probably not going to check that out. So when the next Twist format came out, they finally did something a lot more interesting, but the average player at this point kind of gave up on this mode, which leads us to commons only. Commons only is a really good idea for a Twist format, potentially solving the biggest issue that we had with the Wonders format, how expensive it is for the average player, which meant that could enable some really interesting decks while not really breaking the budget for people who don't want to spend money. The problem was the Caverns of Time was still in this format, which means there were some power outliers and you would basically queue up against the same deck over and over again. And because this is commons only, the decks are not that exciting because they're common cards. How flashy can the average common card really be? And as much as I'm a big fan of smacking minions in Hearthstone, this got boring pretty quickly, which is unfortunate because that is another month of Twists that people kind of just wrote off as whatever. You could kind of see a trend here that the Caverns of Time has not been very pleasant to the Twist format, but unfortunately the damage is already done leading into the next format, which I believe is probably the coolest one that they have done so far. This was called Fast Forward. The idea is incredibly interesting. You start off the very first month with the Legacy set. The day after, you get Curse of Naxxramas. The day after that, you get Goblins versus Gnomes, and so on and so forth until every single day there is a new expansion all the way till the end of the month. The best thing about it, in my opinion, was how fresh the game felt every single day. The unfortunate reality was people just don't really care. The hype of Twist has been completely dropped at this point. So in order for Twist to really have momentum again, they need to do something incredible for their next Twist format. Now, as cool as the next Twist format is, the problem is that Twist was down for an additional 2 months, which is another 2 months that passes by and people completely forget that this format even exists. But for June, they showcased Whizbang Heroes. The concept was that if you owned any of the legendaries listed here, you got a brand new deck that you didn't have to build with an exciting hero power in a brand new way to play Hearthstone. The one I really want to showcase is Xyrella, which had a really interesting win condition of getting your hero all the way to 60 life, and therefore you win the game. Now, as unique as this format was, and believe me, I was really hyped to play this, there was a couple issues with it. But before we get to it, I want to talk about this little blurb at the bottom of the page that they introduced this format in. One of the things we're trying with Twist Season is messing with the balance cadence for this mode. Whizbang Heroes has a variable health that we can quickly adjust, so we plan to make weekly health adjustments to respond to the meta developments. The hope is that these weekly updates will help address the issue we've seen in past Twist seasons where it didn't line up well with our patch schedule. After the June season, we will be bringing back Whizbang Heroes for the July season with 9 additional heroes to try. After the July season, Twist will be dark again for a while. We sometimes see people asking why there are so many seasons when Twist isn't available. By design, Twist isn't an always on mode like most other modes in Hearthstone. It's more of like an extended event. We want Twist to feel fun and fresh rather something that quickly fades into the background noise. So how successful was Whizbang Heroes? Unfortunately, if you couldn't guess, it did not pan out as well as I hoped. The problem was with Whizbang Heroes, just like almost every other metagame, there were a couple of heroes, especially one, Arfus the dog, that was absolutely disgusting, and the power level discrepancy between that and the rest of the decks was just insane. And by the time it was finally really addressed, it was too late. People were over the format, people stopped caring, and even when they added additional new heroes in June, there was another hero that was broken with Rarran. I'm not going to call Whizbang heroes necessarily a failure, and I hope if the Hearthstone team watches this, I don't want you guys to look at this as a failure. The future of Twist was actually extremely dark, not only because of the fact that it went offline for months, but they returned to the Wonders format, which wasn't a inherent success to begin with. Whizbang heroes went down August 1st. Wonders came up December 3rd. That meant we had to wait September, October, November for another Twist format to only get the same Twist format that people already didn't like. And in the most recent patch, as I'm recording this video, which actually is the reason I'm recording this video entirely, we got this update for Twist. The wonderful Ungoro format will end with the February season, and then Twist will be on hiatus. We'll have more information about the future Twist seasons in a future update. In my mind, Twist is already dead in Blizzard's eyes. Caverns of Time clearly wasn't the success that they hoped it would be. A lot of the work that they're putting into Twist is clearly not making them any return on investment that they truly feel like it is worth having a Twist format. Now, obviously, I'm not just making this video to shit on this format and how they've handled it. I want this format to succeed because more than anything else in the world, I want custom games in Hearthstone. So if this is the closest thing that I'm going to get to potentially some really cool formats, please let this thrive, Blizzard, and I'm here to help you the best I possibly can. I am not a game designer. I am a YouTuber first and foremost. So I'm coming at this from purely what I think would be a good idea. And obviously, I don't know how this is even ran behind the scenes. First and foremost, Twist should not be down this often. I understand that you guys want to make some really cool ideas happen, but if Twist is down for more than half the year, it is not a good sign to anybody because no one's going to get into the habit of playing that format. The easiest solution to this is just take the expansions that are currently in the arena format and just allow people to build decks with those. That way it's a more automated system that links up directly to the arena system, and therefore you already have a Twist format with a variety of different cards, which leads me to my next point. The biggest problem with Twist by far is monetization. Now, it's quite obvious Caverns of Time is needed for a return on investment with this Twist format. But if the format that is following Arena, for instance, is successful, people will go buy packs from those expansions to play with those cards. Even though it's not this new Caverns of Time set, Blizzard is still making money with one way or another. The third and arguably the most important thing that I would do is do some really wacky Twist formats. For instance, something that I've always wanted in Hearthstone is to build a deck with two different classes, not just dual class cards like we've had. I mean combining any two classes with the available cards and making something insanely broken. We've already seen that it's very difficult to balance the Twist format anyways. So if you give us the option to do some really crazy stuff, of course it's going to be broken, but I would play the shit out of that for like a week straight. Could you imagine like Priest and Warlock or like Druid with any other class? But I think the best way of handling Twist, and obviously this is probably not going to be the case because Blizzard wants to make money, is make Twists with the card sets that are equivalent to standard, but add a really interesting twist to it. I understand Twist has had a lot of issues, but I do really believe that there is an audience for it. I think Whizbang Heroes really showcased that people were interested. It just so happened that the balancing was a little too late. Twist doesn't deserve to be just put to the side and die. There is a huge audience for it. Most importantly, I would love to run one. Can I please run a Twist format? Thank you so much.